I'm Anthony Hill from Live Oak, Florida. I buy and refurbish military generators. This is a 15 kW 804A, MEP-804A. I'm delivering here to a customer in Gadsden County, Florida, after Hurricane Michael. This customer was out of power for 2 weeks during Hurricane Michael. I used to buy and sell airplanes. I was a pilot, I am a pilot. I would buy planes and refurbish those, repaint them, whatever it would need. We'd overhaul engines. I had a friend that was an A&P IA, and then we would do whatever needed to be done. When we got done, then I was, of course, doing that on my own. I did it for about 15 years as a hobby. I had an airstrip at my house and a shop in there and everything. I'm going to show you the engine compartment. This is a Isuzu C240 engine. It's 4-cylinder diesel and excellent generator engine. This is, as you can see, it's about a 50-55 horse motor. The military generators come with these wiring schematics. Each wire has its own number. As soon as you learn what they're calling each component, it's actually very easy to diagnose any problems. Like I say, when the wires are numbered, it's really easy to trace them and to see if you have any shorts or cut wires or loose wires or whatever it might be. Most everything the military has is underrated. Like this trailer, it says that it's a, let me look here a second. Okay, it says it's the 2.5-ton trailer. And I mean, you could put 5 tons on this trailer, you know. This same trailer, they'll put 15s, 30s, and 60s on this same trailer. It has a hand brake for each wheel, a parking brake. When you pull this down, it locks that wheel down so it won't move around, or if you want to jack it up or whatever, it'll hold it stationary. There's one for each wheel. To hook your electric cables to this generator, you come into this pocket right here with your wire. You come in here, then you go to these split bolts. You loosen this nut up like so. You put your wire in between, then tighten it back down. Here's a plastic wrench for tightening those, or you can use a crescent wrench or whatever. It's 1 3/8. They have ground, neutral, L1, L2, L3. Now, under a normal situation, if you wanted 12240 for a residential, you would hook to ground, to neutral, L1, and L3. Generally speaking, the only time you hook to L2 is when you want to go 3-phase. Although you can hook to L1 and L2 for 12240, but it's basically for the 3-phase. This generator has an auxiliary fuel tank, and you can see it's been plumbed from the fuel tank over to the port, which goes to the fuel pump that pumps from the auxiliary fuel tank. It drops it into the onboard tank, and then there's a float in the onboard tank that tells that when to cut on and when to cut off. And it'll pump into the onboard tank and drop it in there. Then you can just fill up your auxiliary fuel tank. You don't have to worry about putting fuel into your onboard tank unless you just want to. The military had an experimental landing craft that they were working with. They got one built, or I don't know how many, a few of them I think, but they decided that they weren't going to use them or it didn't work out right. And so then they sell the components off. I bought 70, I think 72 or 4 of these tanks. And they're aluminum. They were meant to go in a boat. They got 3 baffles in them, very heavy duty tanks, 75 gallon. They come in wooden crates, and their inventory number is like $3,100 on these little tanks. The starting sequence on the MEP-804A is you go here to the auxiliary prime and run, and then go to the start. And when you start it, you hold it in start position 2 or 3 seconds longer than you think would be normal. That energizes the generator head, and also makes sure that your oil pressure gauge is up in the, has good pressure. If not, it'll shut it down because of low oil pressure. The prime and run does the same thing. You hear that fuel pump running? What that's doing is, this has, most all of them have 2 fuel pumps. When it has a big injector pump, this one has a primer pump on the side of it. The 5s and the 10s will have 2 separate electric fuel pumps. One's for the auxiliary fuel tank, where it'll pump out of the auxiliary fuel tank and drop it into the onboard tank. If you have an auxiliary fuel tank like this one does, after you start the generator, then get back to this position, and it will automatically pump out of the auxiliary fuel tank. The generator is for single phase or 3-phase. I have load tested these generators, 15 kWs, at 20 kW single phase. It's a 15 kW generator, where in theory you think it only would do 10 kW single phase. But I load test them at 20 kW, and it does get right up to the 100% on the gauge, but it'll do 20 kW. The 20 kW is at 100% or right close to it. And so to do it 24/7, I think that you can do that. But it's something that I wouldn't do unless I just had to for some reason, because it's at full capacity, and I wouldn't want to run anything a long time at full capacity. But I think this generator would handle it, but I wouldn't do that unless I just had to. I'd run it more like at 75 to 80% in that range. Yeah, it'd be like 15 kW, but if you needed more, it's okay to go on up, But to run it anything day in and day out, it's full capacity, that's maybe not the best thing to do. Now this is, if you want to change your voltage, you can go from 122.08 or 244.16 just by taking this cover off, loosening these nuts, and moving this thing up to where that white arrow is at that point. Then you'll have 244.16. Then tighten it back down. This is your water reservoir for your radiator starter. This is an Isuzu C240 engine. They have them in skid steers and a lot of construction equipment. Chrysler uses this same motor in Jeeps that go over to Europe. They can't use them in the US for different EPA reasons, but it's the same motor. Very good motor. This is just a reservoir for when the fluid gets hot and expands. That's a place for it to go. When it cools down, you can suck it back into the radiator. See this fuel pump right here? That's the fuel pump that pumps out of the auxiliary fuel tank and drops it into the onboard tank. This is the battery box, battery access. 2 12-volt batteries. It's a 24-volt system. This hose right here is for draining the oil on the engine. You take this plug out and put an extension on there and open the valve, and it's really easy to change oil on the motor. Drain the fuel from the tank. You can open this valve and take this off. This drains the fuel out of your tank. If you want to change the oil on the engine, you unscrew this plug and put an extension. This is a 3/4 mil adapter. You can screw on there with a pipe. They also have a hose that comes with some of these, and it goes out to where you can drop it into a bucket. Then you open this valve and the oil drains right out. You would take where you put where the dipstick is, and you pour the oil in, you take that off where it could pull air through there, you know, and let it drain real good. It's better to crank it up first, let the oil be warm before you change it. It'll just drain out better. You put the oil in the motor right on this side. Right here is a dipstick for checking the level of the oil, and that's also where you pour the oil in. Just unscrew this. That's your dipstick. And that's where you pour oil in, right there. That same place there with the funnel. In the military service manual, they say to change oil. Most generators every 300 hours, unless conditions are real dusty or something like that. The different people say different things about when you should be changing the oil in your car, truck, or generator. All my diesel engines I change at 100 hours. On my tractor, at 100 hours, you can still see through the oil. People would say, well, you don't need to change oil then. Well, maybe not. But to me, it's just money well spent to go and put fresh oil, make the engine last longer, the bearings and whatever's in there where there's friction, then fresh oil, less dirt, means there'll be less wear. These are the stabilizers for the rear of the generator trailer. You pull the pin right here, drop these down, extend them out, and it gives support to the rear of the generator, especially if you're going to be taking the generator off the trailer, then you have additional support here. It's something that isn't used very much, you know, sometimes never. If you want to pull the generator off, then naturally you want to drop those legs down. This is the access to the air cleaner. You can see it's has a big filter here with a big canister type. You take this screw loose here, pull this top off, and you can have access to the air filter. The air filter, the fuel filters, the oil filters, you can get all these at a local auto parts store. You probably would have problems if you told them that, because I can tell from experience. If you go up there and say, I've got a ZZ C240, I need an oil filter, they don't have that listing. But you can go online and put in there, as an example, this machine's an MEP-804A. You can put in there oil filter for the MEP-804A. And then it'll tell you, you have to look a little bit, but you can see what the oil filter is. I have a list at home with all the filters and the filter numbers. And so they're readily available. And they're not very expensive. The military says that these 5 kW generator runs about 0.4 gallons at full load, whatever full load is on a 5. On a 10, it's like 0.9 something. On the 15, it's 1.3, I think, or maybe 1.3 something. But that's at full load. Now, if you're only using a percentage of that, then naturally it's going to use less fuel. And as an example, I used a 10 kW at my house the last time we were out of power, the last hurricane, and it was showing about 28 to 30% on the gauge. It shows how much power it's pulling and how much you have left. Well, at that setting, I checked it, it was only burning between 1/4 and 1/3 a gallon an hour. Yet the specs say it burns 0.9 something, but that's at full load. So if you have a part of the load, then it's going to use part that much of fuel also. Read a lot about these generators, and they tell me that the military engineers that designed these generators, they spec'd what parts they wanted. They didn't care what the price was. This is what they wanted. In the 5s and 10s, they wanted the Lister-Petter diesel motor. It's a very good motor. In this one, they spec'd the Isuzu diesel. In the B model, they spec'd the Yanmar diesel. Whatever they spec for these generators is usually the best quality that you can get. Whatever they had in mind and whatever they want to accomplish, they use very good components. I've heard it said, and I believe this is probably the best generator you can buy. What I tell most of my customers is if they can, once a week, go out and start the generator and let it get up to operating temperatures. It's usually around 180 degrees where the thermostat opens. At least let it run to that point, say 5 minutes. You're charging the batteries, you're making sure everything is working okay, because this is an emergency backup generator. If you do that every week, say every 2 weeks, then you know when the time comes, when you're out of power, you've already been checking your generator. You know it's ready to go. It keeps the batteries charged, it keeps everything going the way that it should. So I'll say every week, no more than every 2 weeks, go out and start your generator and let it run until it reaches temperature. The emergency stop is pretty obvious here, the big red button. For some reason something's happened and you want to stop it, you push it in and it shuts everything off. Maybe you got a fuel leak, who knows what. But if you want to kill it real quick, you just push that in and emergency stop. Pull it out and it's ready to go again. As you start this generator, there won't be any power down to the terminals. The reason being, when you start it, you want the engine to warm up. As it warms up and you have your load hooked up, you're ready for power, you see the temperature going up to where, hopefully it's already up to 180, but as long as it's warmed up and moving up, and you push this switch up, that closes the circuit. This light will come on, and then those terminals are hot. Now, after you've been running it for 8 or 10 hours, or ever how long you're ready to shut it down, you wouldn't want to shut it down under a load. So what you do then is you push this down and open that circuit. This light will turn off. You can hear the engine if you have much of a load. Sounds a little bit different. So then you've just taken all the load off the engine and generator. You let it run a few minutes to kind of cool down or normalize, then turn it off. The same way you would any good diesel engine. They call this an AC interrupter. But it's an AC circuit interrupter. That's all it's doing is breaking the contact. It's a contactor. Push them together, they're closed. You close the circuit and it's hot. When you open the circuit, you separate them, it's open. Then there's no power coming down to the terminals. That is controlled by an ECU. And that electronic control unit has information coming to it so it can see how much load there is there. And so it will hold the 60 hertz and basically the same RPM by controlling the actuator on the injector pump. If you have a small load, then just a little bit of fuel is going through. You got a bigger load, then it increases the fuel supply to the injector pump. And that way, it holds the same RPM no matter what your load is. That's how it controls that. The military says that these 5 kW generator runs about 0.4 gallons at full load, whatever full load is on a 5. On a 10, it's like 0.9 something. On the 15, it's 1.3, I think, or maybe 1.3 something. But that's at full load. Now, if you're only using a percentage of that, then naturally it's going to use less fuel. Now, as an example, I used a 10 kW at my house the last time we were out of power, the last hurricane, and it was showing about 28 to 30% on the gauge. It shows how much power it's pulling and how much you have left. Well, at that setting, I checked it, it was only burning between a quarter and a third of a gallon an hour. Yet the specs say it burns 0.9 something, but that's at full load. So if you have a part of the load, then it's going to use part that much of fuel also. On the fault indicator system, it says no fuel. Really, what should be there is low fuel. When it gets low on fuel, it'll shut itself off. It won't be out of fuel, it'll just be low on fuel. When it's about a quarter of an inch from the pickup tube, it shuts itself off. It hasn't sucked any air, so all you do is just put fuel in there and it should be ready to start right up and go. If you haven't started these generators up in a while, this one has a hand primer on the side of the injector pump. You can feel it tighten up. Just pump it a few times to feel it tight, then start it. And it'll help you from having to spin over some extra times, you know, where it might be some air in there or whatever it might would be. I've noticed on the 15s, on the Yanmar and the Isuzu, that those seem to, and you hadn't started them for a while, they'll spin over a while before they kick and go, you know. The 5 and 10s, they just go real quick. But if you hit this primer, that makes it go a lot faster. This is the priming pump for the injector, a fuel injector. And sometimes when it's been sitting for a long time, you might want to pump this a few times till it's tight before you try starting it. Just makes it start a lot easier and make sure the fuel is right where it needs to be. The dead crank switch here is for maintenance basically. It's in the normal position right now. It's for normal operation. That's the off position where everything is turned off. The motor won't crank from the master switch. You can also turn the motor over from right here too. You can bleed your fuel filters from right here. This is just a switch that helps you in maintenance. You can just drop little stuff right in here. There's not much of a storage place, but you can drop a little bit right there. There's one right here. That's the plug off your trailer, in case you want it for anything. And there's one right here. Put stuff in there. And then this one has a small toolbox. Of course, the fuel tank kind of messed it up a little bit, but there's an accessory box here you can put stuff in. Well, when I get a generator in, the first thing I do is take all the skins that I can off. The outside covers, I take what I can off, and then I look things over, make sure the engine turns over. If it turns over and looks okay, then I go in and put fresh oil and filters in it. And I drain the fuel tank and run a little fresh fuel through the lines, make sure it's not got dust or dirt or whatever inside that. Then I put fresh fuel filters on it. Then at that time, I'll see if I can start it. A lot of times the injector pumps are plugged up or whatever it might would be, and just do whatever, you know, that you need to do. Then once you start it, then you can see if it's producing power, if the hertz is where it should be, and so forth. You can look at your fault indicators. Then just generally look everything over. Military generators are designed where you can use a forklift from either end or from either side. Naturally, with this one on the trailer, this would be your best point to go right through here with the forks and pick it up and pull it off of there.